Welcome to the Dalen Show. People, how's it going? How's it living? Appreciate you guys for tuning in this week. It means a lot as always. Got a new system going on, man. Appreciate you guys for tuning in for so long. Said a couple weeks ago we were getting in the process of moving into college, which is why I was unfortunately unable to record and put out an episode last week. So we're getting back this week. Settled in now. Finding a little bit of new features to fill in with. But I appreciate you guys checking in and keeping in contact with me. Thank you guys for all that love. Uh, Not too much to talk about right now, but let's, without further ado, introduce our guest for this week, Mr. Jeffrey Kee. Woohoo! First
What's
off,
going on,
Jeff,
bro?
appreciate you for coming on, man. How's everything treating you right now? I know that we all have so much going on right now. How's life going for you right now, man?
Yeah, Dalen, I appreciate you having me on, man. But everything's been good. It's a little bit slow right now. It's the G League off season, it's NBA off season. So there really isn't like too much going on that end. I'm just kind of waiting for the season to ramp up again. That's when the action all starts.
Absolutely, man. You've been doing so much within the game of basketball for so long. What is it that excites you the most now that you're kind of seen as much as possible about the game?
To tell you the truth, I still get excited like it's day one when I first started working in basketball. I started working in basketball when I was in high school. That was
Mhm.
actually my first job. I really wasn't, much of a player. I could play here and there, but when I was in high school, I worked as an intern when I was like 15, 16 years old for a minor league team in my area, and so that kind of grew from doing that to coaching high school basketball. I worked for the UMBC men's and women's basketball teams, and then now working for the G League. So I get excited like it's day one. You know how it is, like when you're a lover of basketball, when you're infatuated with the game. You know what I mean? Any type of basketball, whether WNBA, NBA, G League, it's all exciting.
Absolutely, man. Jeff, for the listeners and viewers that may not know a lot about you so far, just give them a brief overview about yourself, where you're from, and just some things you've been able to do in your lifetime to help you get where you are today, man.
Yeah, so I'm from Maryland. I was actually born in Washington D.C. and then raised in Maryland. Went to UMBC where I worked as a student manager as an undergrad for the men's basketball team, and then I was a graduate assistant for the women's basketball team. And then around 2020, I've been a G League fan back, beginning to the D League days back in around like
Hmm.
2015 when I started getting into it. And from there it just kind of raveled into an obsession with the G League more than the NBA, you know what I mean? And so over the past like 5, 6 years or so, I've just been totally infatuated with the G League. And I watch the NBA too, but I don't really care about, Luca, Trey. I'm more concerned with the G League guys that are in the NBA that are getting playing time. And around 2020 is when I started my page called G League TV, and it was something that it was just something I created because I was bored. I always wanted to start a basketball page, and I figured, you know what? There's so many NBA pages out there that show the same LeBron highlights and
Yeah.
Steph, 40-foot 3 pointers. I might as well make something that's a little bit more different. And so I came up with G League TV, and it was slow from the beginning. Then it kind of picked up over the last year or so, but through G League TV, I've been actually able to work for the G League. So last November, it's been around like 10 months or so, but last November, I was hired by the G League to be a content producer, so be like media and digital content producer. And so I've been working with the G League for about 10 months. And I'm also on the G League show, the Weekly G. I started working behind the scenes on the show. And then kind of midway through the season, they brought me on to be on air, on one of the, and that was cool experience for me too, because I'd never been on camera before. So it was a cool learning experience. But, we're on every Wednesday. I don't know what it's going to be this for season two, but last season it was every Wednesday at 7 p.m. we were on. We talked about what was happening in the G.
Where did your love for the G League in general come from? Because I know you have so much love for just basketball in general, but you have your background right now, especially is in the G League. Where did that love and passion come from?
I really think that it started from when I was in high school and I was interning for the minor league team because, when you're 15, 16 years old and you're working with guys that played overseas, guys that were not even really stars at the college level, but good players at the college level, you're 15, you don't know any better. You think they're like rock stars, and it kind of got me into this mindset of like loving and appreciating these players that don't really get that much attention, aren't in the mainstream whatsoever, but they can really hoop, and so I think it stemmed from there because ever since then, working with UMBC too, we're a small Division I team. Most of our guys don't go play pro. If anything, after their 4 years are over, they go get regular jobs, just like the regular person. So I think it kind of stemmed from that. And then when I first started going to G League games in 2015, back when it was the D League, I started my hometown team at the time was the Delaware 87ers. And tickets were $7. It didn't matter where you bought your ticket because unlike an NBA game, you can just move around the arena, not going to care. There were so few people that you could buy a $7 ticket to sit up top and then you could just move down and no one would stop you. After the game, you can wait by the locker room and talk to the players, meet the players. It was just a cool experience. A really eye-opening experience for someone that loves basketball, someone that wants to meet players, hear their stories and stuff like that. So I think that's where it really stemmed from.
I want to go back and talk about your upbringing in DC and the Baltimore area.
Yeah.
What age did you start finding a love for basketball? And, was there any specific player, team, coach, or anything of that sort that kind of just clicked with you and you kind of realized this is what I love to do and this is what I love about the game?
Yeah, I probably started really getting into basketball when I was around 9 years old, 9 or 10 years old. So I was probably, at fourth or fifth grade at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, Kobe was my favorite player, being from the area, Gilbert Arenas, Gilbert Arenas, Karan Butler, all those guys.
Yeah.
Growing up watching them, those were my favorite, early memories of watching
Mm-hmm.
basketball, really getting into it. And then from there, I've just had a strong appreciation for not only NBA guys, but, the college guys that went to University of
Yeah.
Maryland too. I used to watch them and go to their basketball camps when I was young. And so, kind of just like all levels of basketball. I was into high school basketball, of course, local college basketball, the NBA. And then when the G League was in the D League, back when they were getting like 100 fans per game, I was really into that. So pretty much all, my childhood, just like any other NBA fanatic, basketball fanatic, was just spent, online, looking at stats, watching games, going to games when I was able to. And just, you know, I was when I was young, I knew that I was never going to be a player. You know what I mean? I knew I was never going to be good enough, athletic enough, tall enough to be a player. So back when I was in high school and that was my first job working at the minor leagues, my goal was maybe I can make a career out of basketball as someone behind the scenes, whether
Right.
that's, front office or, even just the guy at the time when you're 15 years old, you're mopping the floors, right? It didn't matter what it was. My goal was just to have a career in the game. And that, I was lucky that I was able to start that maybe before some other people were when I was like 15 or 16. And that's led to me to where I am today.
I would love for you to share a piece of wisdom with people, even myself included, because I feel like there's always the fear of starting something and then it may not blow up overnight or it may not exceed or succeed in a certain amount of time that we would like it
Right.
to. What advice would you give for someone starting a business, no matter what it is, to keep going or to try to find new things to help build your business or whatever it is?
I think when you do that, the most important thing is that you just know from the start that it's going to be slow, right? And then, you can't get discouraged with that. When I first started my G League page, it took about a month and a half to get the first 1,000,
Mhm.
the first 1,000 followers. And there were some days where, you make videos and these videos, it takes a lot of time to like compile the highlights and, make the graphics and stuff like that. Um, they would get probably like 30 likes, right? And then you'd spend, 2 hours on it, right? So you're thinking to yourself, I was thinking to myself, man, 2 hours, 3 hours for a video that gets 30, 50 likes, I don't, in the beginning, I was like, man, I don't know how big this will be. But, over time, it's like more people start sharing it, more people get into it. And I think the algorithm also, whether it's Instagram or even just a business, whatever, they'll start rewarding people who are consistently posting, right? If they're, they realize when their engagement is increasing and stuff like that. But the important thing is just to be patient, right? Any great thing takes a lot of time. And, but other advice that I've just learned over the last few years is that also every job is important.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in college and I was an undergrad and I was working for the UMBC men's team, when you're a student manager, your job is to do all the work that no one else wants to do, right? You're unpaid, you're an undergrad, you're just trying to get your feet wet kind of thing. So you fill up the water, you do like, take care of the clothes. You mop the floors before and after practice, even during practice. When someone falls, there's sweat on the floor, you got to mop it up, right? So you do all the work that is not glamorous, that no one really wants to do. It's certainly not going to be cool to post on Instagram, right? But at the end of the day, it's like those little jobs, even though they're, when you're a student manager, you're at the bottom of the totem pole. If no one does it, then that affects the rest of the team, right? If no one fills up the water, then the whole team goes thirsty, right? If no one mops up the sweat on the floor, then someone could fall and then, break something, sprain something, you know what I mean? So if the laundry doesn't get done, then the players don't have, clean jerseys for practice the next day, kind of thing, right? So all those little things add up to big things. And then a piece of advice that actually one of the guys in the G League, his name is Malik Rose. He's one of the people in the front office of the G League, and he won 2 championships with the Spurs. But he told me that you never know who's going to be someone one day, right? So that could be, you're working with a team and then the ball boy who's, all they do is rebound and fill up the Gatorade or whatever. You never know. Like one day they might have ambitions to be a manager, a general manager one day, a coach one day, right? And they could go from, the guy who was collecting rebounds at age 17 or whatever to maybe a GM at like 35. You just never know who's going to be somebody. So that in that case, you just got to be nice to everybody. You got to make connections with everybody. So I think those are like the 3 biggest things that I try to keep with me, as well as like even in the G League now, I've been there for 10 months, and everybody, whatever job it is, always wants to be promoted, but it's like, you're not going to get a promotion in 10 months, in a year. It could take 5 years, you know what I mean? But just know that the footsteps that you're putting in today are going to help you tomorrow. So I think those are probably the biggest things.
I appreciate that. I like that a lot. Something that, the reason I started the show was to allow others to share their wisdom and their advice and their journey. So I appreciate your honesty with that. Going back, man, really before even you got to college, where did you learn to pick up your knowledge for media and content creation? And over time, what are some of
Yeah.
the most important things you learned that have helped you get where you are today about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. To tell you the truth, I had no ambitions of getting into content creation or anything like that. My goal at one point was to be a college basketball coach. I coached high school basketball as an assistant, not as a head coach. I was as an assistant coach. For UMBC, I was working as the graduate assistant for the UMBC women's team. And then my goal was to be an assistant coach afterwards, right? So that was like one of my, ambitions at the time. And then the G League page really started taking off. And I was like, oh, maybe there's an avenue that I can explore here, that can, my ultimate goal, just like anybody that loves basketball, is to work in the NBA, work in the G League. So I was like, maybe there's an avenue here that I can explore that can kind of help me get to where I want to get to. And so with content creation, it's just one of those things that you got to really try, right? And then you never know like what you can take it or what you can come up with until you've like put 2 feet in and you've researched things, or you've kind of like taken the time to think outside the box, But my biggest advice when it comes to content creation is really just like never look at a trend and be like, oh, I got to follow that trend, right? When I was starting my G League page, I really wanted a basketball page. You know what I mean? I really, and you see the same stories getting talked about over and over, right? It almost becomes the way that Instagram is right now. And maybe same thing with Twitter too, is like there's an overconsumption of LeBron highlights, right? Of Trae Young highlights. And it almost gets to the point where, they're all competing against each other, right? Whereas on the G League side, when I made my page, I was like, the good thing is that even though it started off really, really slow, I wasn't competing with anybody, So like when there was a G League like game winner, or there was a crazy play that happened or whatever, I didn't have to rush to be like, oh, I got to get up before everybody else, 20, 100 other pages are going to get the same thing up. I wasn't thinking that because I was like, oh, no one else is really covering the G League. So the only person or the only other page that would post it is the real G League page. You know what I'm saying? So in that aspect, it worked out for me because I was able to create kind of like my own lane. And anyone that wants to start a page, I just advise them, think of like different avenues, right? Don't necessarily think about the NBA. Think about maybe making, the ball league in Africa, right? The Basketball Africa League. It's young now, right? It's only in year 2, but it's sponsored by the NBA, right? And I think that's something that could actually become big within the next like 10 years with the amount of talent that comes out of there, right? So I was like, maybe if you were, or someone was one of those early adopters of someone that was pushing out content from the ball league, right? Maybe it would start off slow like the G League page did, but within 3-4 years, when the ball league really starts to pick up, your page will also pick up, and you'll be the guy that was kind of behind that before everybody else. Same thing with the WNBA. I know that, a lot gets made about the WNBA. A lot of people don't take it as seriously and stuff like that. But, there's an avenue there too, because a lot of times I see a lot of stuff get pushed about the WNBA about, of course, right now, Brittany Griner and like the social movements that they really advocate for. But I don't really see too many pages that really advocate for how good these women are and their highlights and stuff like that. So there's maybe an avenue there for people to explore as well. But yeah, I would just be like, when you're trying to think of a page or trying to think of content, don't always go with the trends, right? Just try to be creative and think outside the box, and in the long run, you'll be rewarded for that.
I like that a lot. I like that a lot. Because media has changed so differently in the past couple of years. And I always say, if you don't feel comfortable with something, whatever you're putting out, even if you're trying to reach the most people, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. And so
Right. Right.
I love the advice you just gave, man. I appreciate that. Jeff, one of my passions that I talk about so very often is my family and how much they've meant to me and how much I learned and grew from them. Uh, Talk about how much your family, your parents implemented making sure you were successful in life and some of the things that you learned from them.
Yeah, I mean, I have a twin brother as well, you know what I mean? And so my twin brother, he's not nearly as into basketball, but he's kind of like my rock in terms of, those early days when I was working in basketball, you don't get paid much money or any money.
Hmm.
You do a lot of jobs for free. You go to camps just to kind of get your name out. And you work different clinics for free, basically. When I was coaching high school basketball, you don't really get paid any money for that, right? So those early days when I wasn't making like any money or hardly any money. And then those days I was like, man, I don't know how long I should do this for, right? Because you're thinking to yourself, you see all your friends making a ton of money out of college. You're like, if I pursued that route, I could probably doing the same thing. So those early days, like my family, my brother, they were all instrumental in that because there was a lot of times, and that goes for anybody that wants to be like an entrepreneur, an actor, a musician, you know what I'm saying? There's all these those early days are kind of like the hardest ones, but they're also super enjoyable. There's a lot of pros and cons to that. But even when I was in high school, when I was in high school, I couldn't drive back then, right? So like my parents, taking me to practice when I was working for the minor league team, taking me to games because there was no other way I could get there. You know what I mean? And so without them, certainly I wouldn't have the ambition to want to do what I'm doing now. And then also, everybody wants to be, a star and kind of like elevate their family name, right? And so with me in the G League, like that's one thing right now. Like I said, I've only been there about 10 months, so I'm not expecting this to happen like anytime soon. But 5 years down the line, if I'm able to hopefully stay there and make a name for myself, I do want to make a name and for the people that have come before me that work super hard to help me get here.
In starting your career in the minor leagues in high school or whatever jobs you've been able to do, has there ever been any setbacks where you maybe were like, was like, maybe this isn't for me. You kind of overcame that and you kind of push forward and you continue with whatever you were going with and you're still working on. Okay, let me rephrase my question. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a time where no matter the job you were doing, you kind of felt a little discouraged or you lost belief in whatever you were doing? And if so, how did you overcome that?
Um, in terms of setbacks, I've been lucky that I've never had any huge setbacks, right?
Hmm.
Everybody, when you're working in basketball, right? A lot of times the enjoyment of your job depends on the coach you're working for. You know what I mean? And I've worked for some really, really good coaches. And I've also worked for some coaches that probably weren't nearly as good, and they weren't as enjoyable to work with, right? And that's just part of the game, just like when you go to any job, sometimes you're gonna have a boss that's like super open and treats you well and stuff. And then sometimes you have a boss that is the complete opposite, right? So, with that, there's some pros and cons, right? So like when you're a coach, you're a leader, right? And at the time I wanted to be a coach. And even now, I want to be one day like a manager or on the executive team or whatever. So I do want to have a leadership role one day. And, whether I was working for a good coach or a bad coach, I think that there's always been something you can take from it, right? With the good coach, you can take like how they lead, what their management style is like, what their coaching style is like, and how they treat their players and their staff. With the bad coaches, you can kind of learn like what not to do, right? What doesn't work, right? So with every opportunity like that, whether it's been good or bad, I don't necessarily look at it as like a setback. It's just more like, if I was working for a coach I didn't necessarily like nearly as much, there was still a lot I can learn from it. If there was a team that I work with that didn't do nearly as well as we hoped, because I've been on some winning teams and I've been on some really bad teams too. With the bad teams, there's learning lessons in that as well, what to bring back for next season, what not to bring back for next season, things that work, things that didn't work. So I kind of look at it as like all a learning experience. And that sounds like cliche a little bit, but I do try to look at it from a more, positive side of like, okay, it didn't go my way this year, but there's some things I can learn that can help me next season.
Jeff, when you get to UMBC, what is your mindset and what is your end goal?
When I first got to UMBC,
Yes, sir.
when I first got to UMBC, like I think my goal was just to be cool, right? Like, everyone when they get to college, they just want to be, you're starting fresh, you don't know anybody, right?
Hmm.
You're trying to make your own lane for yourself. You're trying to impress like the people at the dorm and stuff like that, right? So when I came in, I was like, just like any 17-year-old when they first get to college, right? It's, you're probably a little immature, right? You're not as focused on your goals that you probably should be. You're trying to still figure out what your goals are, and I was no different than the average 17, 18-year-old in that perspective. But I think early on, I did know that, hey, listen, like I do want to work in basketball. You know what I mean? So that was one thing that, even when I was going to class and stuff like that, I would skip class a lot of times to make sure that I went to practice or to make sure that I was, attending all the team events and you know what I mean? So it was never like I was, especially in the beginning, I was not nearly as focused as it probably should be, right? Because there's all these other things that were kind of like attracting my attention, But at the same time, I knew early on, it didn't take me long to realize like, hey, if I really want to be good at this, I got to put a lot of time into it. I got to make sure that, on Friday nights, maybe have to be in the gym with the players, rebounding for them or helping them work on drills instead of going to a party and stuff like that. So, but yeah, it was a little bit of both though.
What were some of the colleges that you looked at going to other than UMBC, and why did you essentially choose UMBC?
I only applied to local schools, being from the area. It was Maryland, it was Towson, it was like Frostburg, Salisbury, just all the local schools in the area. I basically all the local public schools I applied
Hmm.
for. And I got into all of them. The thing is that I would have gone to Maryland, but I got into Maryland like second semester, right? So that means I would have to like sit out the first semester, then enter in like December or January. So I was like, I might as well just go to UMBC. But that was a great experience for me too, because UMBC is not, it's a small D1 school. It's not, the college life, the campus life is not nearly as exciting as it is at some of the other local schools or some of the
Hmm.
schools nationally. But, if you want to find a school where you can just like study, work hard, you're around a good group of people who are, still young and learning, but ultimately very mature, UMBC is the right school to go to. So and it helped me too, because like, if I went to like West Virginia or something like some crazy party school, I just know for a fact that I would have not have been focused on my goals, right? And that would have been a lot harder for me to really like narrow in, because there's so many things that like I said, everybody when they first get to college, they want to be cool, right? So a lot of times you'll sacrifice working hard or, studying or something like that for being cool and, hanging out and stuff like that. So with UMBC, there were a lot of those temptations were gone, because that environment there is not like that. And so I was able to early on just focus on what I needed to focus on, and it helped me a lot more in the long run.
I would love to hear your passion about your coaching and your love for coaching, because if I wasn't pursuing a field in journalism, coaching would be something that I would be going into.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is your what kind of coach are you? How would you describe yourself as a coach, and what are some of the things you always look at your players to get out of?
Yeah, so I was never a head coach. I was a head coach for, well, I'll take that back. I was a head coach for smaller teams, but never a head coach at the college level or at at the high school level I was an assistant. But my goal was to, at the time when I was in it, I was really trying to figure out, okay, I was hell-bent on being an assistant somewhere after I finished my graduate assistantship. And so I was like, okay, I work with some really good coaches and I work with some really bad coaches. And I was trying to piece it all together to kind of figure out what my coaching style was, right? And so I figured, and it's always subject to change, right? And it also depends on what group you're working with, But at the time, my coaching style was like getting to know them, because I think coaching is so integrated on the psychosocial level too, right? Where you understand your players, right, as more than just athletes. You take time to know them, know their intricacies, know what their what their ticks are and stuff like that. And so that was my goal, was to like learn as much of these players, right? Show them that I care. And then also with that, they'll listen to you a lot more if you can connect with them from a human level, right? As opposed to the coaches who don't, right? So that was always my goal, was like get to know them as much as possible, not necessarily be friends with them. It's hard because you have to draw a balance, right?
Right.
Where, and at the same time, I was around the same age as them, maybe a few years older, but still around the same age, just like a couple years difference or whatever. But, you still try to keep professional, but also just know that they can trust you and you can trust them. And then once that's established, it makes the game so much easier, right? They want to spend time with you in the gym. You know what I mean? They want to, after their classes is over, after they're done with their homework, they'll call you at 10 p.m. and be like, let's get up shots, or like, let's work on some drills and stuff like that. And one thing is that you should never ask your players, and I learned that from working with Coach Ryan Odom, who's now at Utah State, is like, you should never ask your players to be at practice 30 minutes early, stay after if you're not there with them too, right? So when you're the coach, you're the leader. When you're assistant, you're also a leader. You just got to be there all the time, right? You just got to set the tone and set the example. And that was something I always tried to do. And even now, I'm not in a leadership position at the G League at all. If anything, I'm probably at the bottom of the totem pole, because I'm, the one of the newer guys on the team. But at the same time, like all that stuff about showing up early, staying late, right? If you get paid for 8 hours, work 9, work 10, right? All those things are still kind of integrated in my head, that things I need to do, even though I'm not in a leadership position right now, right? So, maybe there could be a time one day where I get back into it. I would love to potentially coach high school basketball again. Do you know what TBT is?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I had my own TBT team, and I coached my own TBT team. We were in it for 2 years. I was the GM for 2 years, and then the second year I coached it, and I was the GM. And so, we ended up losing. You know what I mean? So, but that was the only time I was ever a head coach per se, for that short time in TBT. But that was, But I think there could be a day where I get back into it. Right now I am like pretty set on pursuing the G League and taking it as far as I can. But who knows? Maybe down the line, 5-6 years, whatever, what can happen.
Jeff, whether it was in high school, college, or even your time now with the G League, who've been some of the best players you've ever seen live?
Oh, that's a great question. Is that NBA too? Or is that just more like the G League?
What I would like both for you. I would like, who was the best player you've seen live in the G League and in the NBA?
Okay. Well, in terms of working at UMBC, when I was working at UMBC, we had Jaroslaws, and
Okay.
Jaroslaws ended up playing for the G
hmm
League. He played for the Salt Lake City Stars, and then he played overseas as well. And he was, in my opinion, the best player in our conference at the time. He led us to the win over Virginia in 2018, and he was putting up 20 points a game for 3 straight seasons. So Jairus at the college level, him and then this other guy Anthony Lamb, who had some stints with Houston Rockets, played with the San Antonio Spurs. He was also in our conference, so we played them twice a year. Those were the 2 best players that I've seen at the college level. I know there's much better players at the college level, but in our small conference, they dominated our conference. And at the G League level, my first early days watching the G League, I remember, not even kidding, like Christian Wood at 22 years old,
Wow.
6'10", so wiry, thin. He still is now, but back then he was just a stick.
hmm
But all the skill in the world. And I remember watching him when he played for the 87ers. I used to go to their games all the time. And I was like, wow, like how is this guy not in the league, right? And he was every year in the G League putting up 23 and 12, right? And, his last year in the G League, he put up almost 30 and 14 or something like that. So he was in the G League every single. I was like, wow, like this guy is I don't know what he would do necessarily on the NBA level at the time. I didn't think that he was like going to evolve into what he is now, right? But I was like, there's no way a guy like that who's 6'10", runs the floor like a gazelle, can shoot the three, right? I mean, there's no way that a guy like this shouldn't be on a roster somehow. And so those early days of him, Gary Payton II as well, when he was in the G League, unfortunately, I never got to see Gary Payton II play live in the G League. Whenever whatever team he was on at the time, he was on the Rio Grande Valley Vipers, and then he was on the Oh no, I did get to see him play one with the Capital City, but that was just once. But those early days when he was like getting into the G League and he was a star, I didn't get to see those. I just more watched those on TV and stuff like that, or on the G League website. But watching him play throughout those years in the G League, that was always so much fun. And then trying to think of some other ones that were really good. Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam when they were in the G League. Yeah, so all these guys, I mean, I figured that they would be really good players, that they could put them on any NBA team and they make a difference. I had no idea that, Pascal and Fred would become the players that they were, that they've become in Toronto. And then, so that's the thing about the G League is that there's a lot of guys that put up huge numbers that end up going to the NBA and averaging 2 points a game, right? And then there's a lot of guys that put up some big numbers and they end up going, becoming stars at the NBA. Then there's guys in the G League who don't put up huge numbers and end up having 5, 6, 7-year careers in the NBA as well, right? So it's just, a lot of it's predicated on fit and, the culture that they're in and stuff like that. And at the NBA, I mean, like I said, those early years, like watching Gilbert Arenas, going to games when I was really young and him being like kind of the hometown hero. He was by far like a guy that inspired me to want to not only play, but just, be really active in the game. And I take things from these players as well, like Gilbert Arenas, that, I know he had the whole gun incident, but aside from that, he was an amazing player and he was known as just a gym rat, right? So I always admire these guys, Kobe the same way. I always admire those guys that, yeah, they're very talented, but they put in so much work to be that good, And so I could never like admire a lazy player, or a guy that's like, I could never admire like an NBA player who has a reputation for like clubbing or anything like that, just because that is not, if I was in that profession or, my profession now, it's like, it takes so much work to get there. You want to be the best. So you try to like admire players who represent that same mentality in a way.
Jeff, when the G League season is going, break down your schedule with us. Like, what time do you usually get up? Do you have meetings? What are you working on throughout the day? And even talk about your travel schedule. Like, where are you going to across the country? Who are you working with? Stuff like that. Just break down your schedule for us.
Yeah, so when the G League season starts, when the season starts, it's just like nonstop action, because the G League, just to give a little context, I work out of the NBA office in Secaucus, right? And then there's a Secaucus office, then there's an office also in New York. And so, it's a couple thousand people that work between those two, maybe less, maybe it's like 1,000 people, whatever, that work between those two offices, and like 900 of them, if not more, work on the NBA side, right? And then the G League side is much smaller, right? It's much smaller staff. So because it's much smaller staff, you probably have to do more. You work longer hours. And same thing with WNBA. The WNBA staff is pretty small, right, compared to the NBA. So those people on the W side are working, from time sun up to midnight past midnight, right? So that's really what it is like during the season. During the season, it's like you wake up and then all you do the whole day is just G League, right? Whether you're, I'm on the G League show, so it's stuff like with that. There's just so much work to be done in between. Then at night, starting like 6 p.m. is when all the games start, right? So you're covering all the games, and it could be like 10 games per night. That in the West Coast games, that's the problem, is that the West Coast games, they all end at like 1:30 or so, and then by the time you're wrapped up, it's probably 2:30, and then you go to sleep. So it's really from not even kidding, like you start at 9, you might end at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, right? So it's really an all day. It's a huge commitment type of thing. And in terms of travel, we definitely travel for like the marquee games, the playoffs. the G League Showcase. There's stuff in
Mhm.
between that we go to as well. But anytime, like, a big player comes to the G League, or there's a big, marquee game or whatever, right? That's on TV or something like that. We'll always go to that, the ring ceremony type of stuff. So I tell you the truth, I wish that we traveled to like all the time. It's not like all the time. It's like, maybe a couple times a month or whatever, right? But I know on the NBA side, like they're always traveling for games. They just have such a bigger staff, you know what I mean? So it allows them, and they have so much more money too. The money and the funding on the NBA side is just massive compared to what it is in the G League and the WNBA. But I'll say this, like, to be in the G League, in the W2, like in the NBA as well, like you work such long hours that you have to have a love for it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's like it's one of those things where you can't, if you wake up and you wake up and you start work at like 9 a.m. and then you don't finish work until 1:30 a.m. and then you got to wake up and do it all over again, right? There's no weekends off too, because there's just games on Saturdays and Sundays, right? So you might have a random like Tuesday off, or you might have a random Wednesday or Thursday off, whatever. But you don't get, like, it's not like, oh, it's Friday and I get the weekend off, right? A lot of times you're working those weekends too. But if you're not like 100% invested in it, it just, you over time you'll probably just wear yourself out. You know what I mean? And I've seen, in my short time in the G League, I've seen a lot of people just like kind of come and go, because they'll start working, and I think that as the season progresses, they'll be like, oh my god, like I got 5 more months of this, you know what I mean? And then the season ends, and then it's like I gotta do it over, next season, right? So it's just a long process. But like I said, if you love it, not that it doesn't, when they say, oh, if you love something, it doesn't feel like work, that to me, that's not true, right? A lot of times, even if you do love it, it still feels like work, right?
Mhm.
But it'll help the days go by, right? And it'll help the process be a little more enjoyable.
I can tell your passion for the G League is pretty evident. What's it been like to see the notoriety and the attention for the G League grow tremendously over the past couple of years in terms of, they've been a part of 2K now for the past
Yeah.
couple of years
Yeah.
tremendously. Just the media in general has grown for the G League in general. What's it like being a part of that and seeing what you do and what you work so hard for kind of gain so much attention and popularity over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think that's the best part, is because, these players are so good. The players in the G League are so talented. And, I know there's a lot of debate as to whether the G League is the second best league in the world. Some
Mm-hmm.
people make the argument that it is. Other people will say, like, some of the European leagues are better. And, there's argument for both, right? But regardless of whether it's first, I'm sorry, whether it's second or third or fourth, whatever, it's still a top league in the world, right? And over time, especially since I started following it in 2015, where it'd be like 150 people at games. I'm sure a lot of those are friends and family, a lot of kids at these games too, because, they would give the kids tickets for free or whatever. They have to have mom and dad come. Hopefully they buy a hot dog or a hat or something like that, right? To where now, not saying that G League games are sold out, but attendance is much higher than what it was 6 years ago. The G League finals, I was there the entire time, basically sold out every single game. The G League playoffs also not sold out, but great attendance every single game in the G League playoffs as well. So it's been cool to see the growth of the league, and I'm excited to see where it can go from here. The G League is still a really young league. It's only been around for 20 years, starting from 2001. So I'm always like, okay, I still look at it as a startup, even though it's 20 years old. The first 15 years of the G League, people didn't even know about it, right? It was like so under the radar that, it was almost like if you got sent to the G League, that you were, your career was over. You know what I mean? Oh, he got sent to the G League. Oh, he's trash, right? But it's not viewed that way anymore, where NBA
Mm-hmm.
players are looking at it as a viable option to get back into the league, right? Isaiah Thomas, Lance Stevenson, guys like that. They used the G League this year to get back into the NBA, and it was successful for them. And then young players, and even overseas players, are looking at the G League as like, that's my in to get to the NBA. Right.
Right.
And so the talent level has never been higher. I think the attention on the G League has never been higher. And I can see in, 5 years from now, it being, double the amount of exposure it has now. 10 years, right? We could see these games on like ESPN and stuff like that. So I'm really hopeful that as the G League continues to grow, more players get called up, right? More staff members of the G League, who are coaches, assistants, trainers, whatever, they'll get their opportunity in the NBA just because of the amount of exposure.
I want to ask you, what is your personal goal for yourself and for the G League and what you do for the G League? Like, what is your personal end goal?
Yeah, I think my personal goal is to eventually, be a leader in the G League, right? And I don't know necessarily what that looks like right now. I'm still trying to figure it out for myself. But over these 10 months that, I've gotten to meet so many people that work in different aspects of the league. And I always try to figure out if like that's something that I would want to do, down the line, right? Whether that's in basketball operations, whether that's on like the executive team, whether that's in like sponsorships, it doesn't even matter. Just like whatever it is, I try to meet these people and try to gauge like, oh, could I see myself doing that? Could I see myself having an impact at that level? But I do want to stay in the G League because Andre Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Andre Ingram is like the G League GOAT, right? In terms of just like how long he stayed in the G League,
Mm-hmm.
all the things that he's accomplished in the league, right? And like I was telling you before, the NBA is huge, right? The NBA in terms of like it's just at this point, it's such a machine. The number of people that work for the league, the number of people that are invested in it, right? The G League is small enough where I think that I could be and hopefully make a name for myself in the G League, right? Whereas if I went to the NBA side, I'm not saying I would never want to go to the NBA side because that's intriguing as well. But on the NBA side, there's just so many people that work for the NBA. It's a lot harder, in my opinion, to
Right.
make a name for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of want to be the big fish in the small pond, you know what I mean? Rather than the little fish in the gigantic pond that is the NBA. So my goal is kind of just stay in the G League. We're gonna work as hard as I can, make as many connections as I can, and then see where it takes me from there.
I like that a lot. I like that a lot, man. One of the questions that I always ask before I end my interviews is something that I always as well say if the listeners and viewers don't take away anything, take away this part. It's two questions in one. What's one piece of advice that you would give to anyone listening or watching anything at all? And also, what legacy do you want to leave behind? What do you want people to know about Jeffrey Key that maybe they didn't get to know about yourself?
Okay, so the first one is what piece of advice? The piece of advice, what I would say, anything that's great, and it was a little bit what I touched on before, but anything that's worth pursuing, it's just worth pursuing is gonna take time. You know what I mean? It's like it's hard to be a 25-year-old millionaire. It's hard to be a 35-year-old millionaire. You know what I mean? It just, things like this take 10 years, like 15 years, 20 years. And, you know, for me, that's what I try to think of. Like in the G League, like right now, I'm only right now I'm like a small fry, right? But
Mhm.
10 years from now, right? If I 5 years from now, I could be in a completely different space because of the work that I put in today, right? So that's the biggest thing is that to keep me going and to keep other people going too. It's like, okay, you have not reached your end goal yet, but I'm telling you, like, if you give it 5 years, you'll have a chance of doing something special. You know what I mean? And then like I said before, make your own avenue. It doesn't have to be the cliche avenue of, I'm going to follow this TikTok trend. I'm going to do this because everyone else is doing it. I'm going to wear this because everyone else is wearing it, right? You can do your own thing and then you'll be much happier standing out and being your own person and creating your own lane as opposed to following somebody else's. And then in terms of the legacy that I want to leave, you know, um, it's like with the players that I've worked with in the past, I hope that the legacy I leave is like I was someone that, of course, loved basketball, but even more of that, like loved working with them, right? And treated them the way that they want to be treated as like a great human and stuff like that. But at the same time, working in the G League, I want my legacy to just be like a guy that's helped or been a small piece of the bigger puzzle and helping the G League evolve into what it is today and what it could be, in the next few years. And there's a lot of people that go into that. So I can't even take a lot of credit. I know my G League page, it's helped a lot of people get to know about the G League and keep up with what's going on with the players and stuff like that. And these players wouldn't have a platform to really showcase themselves kind of without it, right? But at the same time, working in the G League, I'm a very small piece to that, so I want to just be known as one of the pieces to like a much bigger puzzle that's helped the G League become what it is.
I appreciate that a lot because what you said is kind of like what I envisioned when I started the show was to help others. give them a platform, give them a place to share their wisdom and their journey and their life stories and their happiness and their funny thoughts or whatever, their sadness. Um, and I could tell you were just so honest and passionate about everything that you talked about and everything you shared. So I appreciate you for that, man. I really
Absolutely.
do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, I would love to ask you because I feel like your answers would be intriguing. If you could have dinner with three people, dead or alive, who would they be?
Oh man. Okay, it would have to start off with, hold on, I know I got it somewhere, with this man right here. I don't know if you can see it.
Okay,
That's
I like
David
that.
Stern.
Mm-hmm.
That's signed too. I got this on eBay a few years ago, but it would be, one of the guys would definitely be Stern, because when Stern took over the league, the league was, I wouldn't say it was in shambles, but it was nowhere near what the league has evolved to nowadays. And so, just his like leadership style, everything that I hear about him was that he was kind of like a tyrant, you know what I mean? And that, he was a very firm leader and a very aggressive leader. And so he's a guy that I would love to know, because also I think of David Stern and I'm like, he's what I envision as like an outside the box thinker, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
like everything that he's done and how he's evolved the NBA. It had to have taken so much time and effort, and just brainstorming and anything to make the NBA and to become the machine that it is today. And so David Stern's definitely one of them. Um, oh man, this is tough. Like, everyone wants to say, with Kobe as my favorite player, everyone wants to say Kobe, but I don't know if it would be necessarily Kobe. I would think um one of the more interesting guys would be like Dennis Rodman, right? I saw him a couple of days ago at
Wow.
SneakerCon.
Okay.
And the thing about Dennis Rodman is I'm so intrigued by the guy every time I read a story about him, every time I see him, because he is just he's like the antithesis of like what is mainstream, right? Like he was
Right.
before it was cool to do all this stuff. Dennis Rodman was the first to do it, and he was looked at such like an outcast. It was like a freak in a way, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this and just the lifestyle that he lived and his personality. And I remember watching the 30 for 30 documentary about him, and him talking about like how he grew up and he was picked on and he was, he was bullied, he was thrown into not lockers but trash cans, by people much smaller than him. Even though he was a bigger guy, he was bullied by people, but he just didn't have like the mental makeup to like to to basically stand up for himself, essentially, right? And so I look at Dennis, and it's like whatever he was back then and what he became, it's just such an interesting dynamic that I don't even think he'd be able to explain. So he'd probably be one that I'd just be interested to know, like his life story and kind of like how he thinks Dennis Rodman was created, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one would probably not even be basketball related. Um, the last one would probably be, I think, because the last one would be Gary Vaynerchuk, right? And that,
Okay.
Gary V is a
I
guy that
love
I
Gary
watched a
V.
lot of his videos, and then those early days where and I'm not saying that I've made it, because I'm not anywhere near what I want to accomplish in life. So I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying that when I had this goal of like working in the G League, right, and doing that, like, there was a lot of times where I was like, man, I don't know if it's gonna happen, right? And watching those Gary Vee videos and those encouragement videos really actually struck a chord with me, during those days where I never was going to give up or anything like that. But, everyone has those days where it's like, oh my God, like I got to, especially in those days I was working with a bad coach, right? It's like, oh my God, I got to go to practice again and go through the same thing and over and over and over. And it's like one of those things where it's, you just, in a lot of ways, he was like the guy that encouraged you, even though I never meet him, you never met him. He's the guy that encourages you to like, okay, keep showing up, right? Keep giving your best effort, regardless of
Mm-hmm.
the circumstances, right? So he'd be a guy that I would like to meet, just because he's one of those guys that, like, in a way, you've never met him, and he doesn't know you, and I don't really know him or anything like that, but just through social media and his videos and YouTube, he's been able to have an impact on your life. It's a weird thing how that works, where you don't even know somebody yet they've encouraged you somehow, and they've, in a small way, helped you get to where you've gotten.
I love your answers, man. I really do. Those are three powerful people, all with three completely different mindsets and different views and values. I feel like that would be a very interesting conversation. I really love your answer. I really do. That's really cool.
There's probably going to be somebody too Dalen that I think of later, and I'm like, damn it, I should have
Hmm.
said him. You know what I mean? But off the top of my head, I feel like those three would be interesting to have a dinner with.
One of my passions is music, and I love getting to talk with other people and hear what they listen to on a day-to-day basis, who are their favorite artists. So what's something that you listen to now? What are some of the artists you maybe listened to growing up? Like, who are your passions in music?
Yeah, when it comes to music, I just have a very diverse
Hmm.
group of people that I listen to. Like, when I every morning I'll either go for like a walk or a run or something like that, you know what I mean? And when I'm doing that, I just, the sun is out, you're just waking up, your body's getting loose. I always listen to like very chill music, right? And when I was growing up, my dad would always listen to this band called Sugar Ray. Do you know who they are?
No, not really.
No, okay. It's like they're more like 90s like
Yeah, that's
pop
before my
music. So,
time. Hmm.
yeah, like 90s pop music and stuff like that. And so a lot of the stuff that I listen to in terms of that is like stuff that, my mom listened to, my dad listened
Hmm.
to, right? And that, when you're riding to school in the car with them, even though it was before my time, even the stuff from like the 80s, whatever before my time, um, there's songs that you grew up with and you still like flash back to that. But nowadays, I'll be honest, like I don't necessarily have like a favorite artist, right? I'm kind of just whatever is like, an artist could have like one good song and I'll be like, oh, that artist is good, right? Even though it's just one good song or whatever. So but I would say like because of growing up and like what my parents listen to, like what my older cousins stuff listen to, like even like growing up like In Sync and Backstreet Boys and stuff like that. A lot of those
Hmm.
bands out, those 90s bands and stuff like that, I still listen to like on a daily basis. And that's part of like my musical playlist basically when I'm going out and exercising. But when I play ball, it's different. Like when I'm playing ball and we're about to go to the court, whatever, it's just strictly rap. You know what I mean? Because I'm not trying to like chill. I'm trying to at least get into a mindset, right? Or like a kill mindset, you know what I mean? So the depending on the circumstance, like whenever, like later, not maybe not today, but like later this week, I'll probably go play basketball with some of my friends, right? Going to the court, it's straight like little baby or just whatever, but just strictly rap, and it gets you into that mindset of like, okay, I'm here to like to destroy these guys, basically. You know what I mean?
Valid, valid. I like your answers, man. What? Any shout outs you want to get to anyone, Jeff?
No real shout outs. I just say, follow my G League page at G League TV. Stay on the lookout for the season that's coming up, and the draft is coming up in like a month or so. So a whole new batch of players will be coming in, and just stay on the lookout for the G League as just in general. There's just so much talent that's infiltrating in and out of the league, and so a lot of these guys that you're watching will be NBA players, will be contributors on NBA teams, and then there's those instances too where they could be like the Pascals or the Fred Van Vliets where they could actually be stars. So watch out for these guys because these guys can really hoop.
I was just going to ask you, could you tell the everyone watching your social media ads and what platforms you're on so they can follow you and reach out to you and share your work and stuff?
Yeah. So on it's at G League TV on Instagram, and then on Twitter. I don't use nearly the Twitter nearly as much, but this season when it starts back up, I'm going to be tweeting all the time off of it. And then on Instagram, my personal one is Jeffrey Sosa 300. So you can follow me on there too.
Absolutely, man. Hey, Jeff, I want to thank you again for coming on, spending some time with me and talking with me and sharing your wisdom. It's meant a lot. I've learned a lot from you, so I appreciate you for coming on with me, man.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Anytime, man. And down the road, I would love to have you back on as you continue to further your exploration and your journey and continue to follow your dreams. I would love to have you back on and just talk more about what you've learned and done in your life. So I
Oh,
appreciate you.
absolutely. Absolutely. We can do like a mid-season check-in or whatever during, when the G League season's starting in and,
Okay.
guys are getting called up and stuff like that. We can definitely do that.
I would love to, man. I would love to. I want to appreciate you again, man. Take care of yourself. And continue doing what we would love others to do as well as continue blessing people and continue changing lives. So thank you, man. Appreciate you
Thank
for
you.
real.
Thank you.
Anytime, man. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. I hope you learned a lot from Jeff, a lot of wisdom and a lot of advice given that was very special. So tune in and learn a lot. Appreciate you guys. All love, everyone. Thank you.